All right, good morning, Mizzou fans. Welcome to the second Saturday of the 2020 Missouri football season. A little bit different than last week. Last week, we came on the air at 4:15, had a night game, stuck around with you till, I don't know, midnight, 12:30, something like that. There's two of me, but there you go. We fixed that. There's now one of me. Sometimes you have the wrong camera on. Anyway, here I am, Gabe DeArmond, PowerMizzou.com publisher, here to take you right up to 11 a.m. kickoff between Missouri and Tennessee. That game is on the SEC network. So we will be here all morning up until then. Right about 10:50, we'll take a 10-minute break before the game. We'll come back at 11 a.m. with the Colin Gentry Law Group game watch along on the call. I will be here. Mitchell Forty actually will be here this week as well. We'll take your guys' comments, chat with you all throughout the game, and then afterwards, the Boulevard Brewing Company post-game drink. We'll take your calls. We'll talk about the Tigers and Vols for as long as you want to talk about. So we're anticipating at least a 7 to 8 hour day here on the internet, starting with this, the Burger Smokehouse at home tailgate show. And look, I come equipped for a morning game. I have my Jet Chip Wasp coffee mug. That's a Father's Day present that I got. Maybe the best Father's Day present that has ever existed. There is always time to run Wasp, even if you're in the middle of a live broadcast. I've got some Burger Smokehouse bacon, got some eggs, got some tater tots. We're ready to go. Morning kickoff. It's actually going to be noon in Knoxville. It is 11 a.m. your time. But we can't tailgate at games. Most of you, I assume all of you, can't even go to this game. So we are tailgating here live on the internet before the Tigers and Vols. What we're going to do throughout this show, we're going to run this ticker here with your full SEC schedule, South Carolina and Florida, the other game that is starting at 11 a.m., along with Mizzou and Tennessee. Everything else later in the day, we can talk about that some. Appreciate you guys that are watching so far. Hope more will join us as we go along. Give us a like, comment, first and second, excellent comments. Look, I just want to prove that we do have people here. We will put your comments on the screen throughout the broadcast. And Jackson, good morning to you. Good morning to everybody watching. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about last week for a couple of reasons. First of all, we've talked a lot about last week, guys. The Tigers and the Tide, 38-19 Alabama. We talked about it all week long. Wednesday night, we had the 573 report. Sorry, I got some texts and comments coming in. 573 report. Mitchell Forty and I broke this game down. Mitchell's going to join us here in about an hour to kind of get his perspective leading up to kickoff. Not going to spend a ton of time on last week because how much could you learn when Missouri played Alabama? Here's what you learned. Missouri's not as good as Alabama. If you didn't know that before last game, God bless you. You're the most optimistic Missouri fan in the world. Or I got to bring up the other possibility. It's possible you're not the smartest guy in the room. So Missouri lost to Alabama. They fought. I liked what Eli Drinkwitz said. Look, fighting, playing hard till the final whistle, that's the minimum expectation. That's what we do here. That's not going to be an option. I thought Missouri, they did some things well, but did a lot of things. There were a lot of things that need to be improved. This week going to be a little bit better test. Tennessee won 31-27 against South Carolina last week. The Vols have won 7 in a row. They haven't really beaten anybody. They beat number 25 Oklahoma State in the Texas Bowl. Other than that, they beat Kentucky. Kentucky was a solid team last year. But then it was Missouri, UAB, I don't know. And I don't know why I said Tennessee beat Oklahoma State because they didn't. They beat Indiana. They really haven't beat anybody. I don't think there was a ranked team in that run. So that doesn't mean Tennessee's not good. Tennessee might have figured it out, got things turned around. They're ready to roll. They looked just fine last week. Not great. Missouri's a 12-point underdog. That's fair. Tennessee is, right now, they're a better football team. They're in a better spot, and they should be a favorite in this game. but this is not an unwinnable game like Missouri had last week. Appreciate your guys' comments and questions rolling in, and we are going to get to those. But one of the things we do here on this pregame show is we give you guys a chance to hear from some of the people that we talk to throughout the week getting ready for this thing. And one of the bright spots, certainly for Missouri last week, was the safety play. Tyree Gillespie was all over the field. Joshua Bledsoe made some plays. I think there was one in the end zone. He made a play on that. But maybe even more than those two, Martez Manuel, sophomore from Rockbridge High School here in Columbia, making he played some last year, but making really his first big-time game starting in the secondary. He started at that third safety position, and he had a heck of a game. Led all SEC defenders last week with 3.5 tackles for loss. So I want to let you guys hear from Martez here real quick, and after that, we'll be back and we'll talk some of your questions, comments, things like that.
I was just wondering, Nick told us that he thought Charlie would have been proud of the way you played, and I was just wondering if you sort of talked to him after the game and what was his sort of thoughts on how you played on Saturday.
I think he thought I played pretty well. He complimented me. He told me just to bring it every week. I'm just trying to let last Saturday go as far as the goods and the bads, and just refocus this week and try to prepare the same way that I did or better, so that I can have as well or even better performance this week.
Andrew Kaufman, you're next.
Hey, man, what was working for you last week? You mentioned bringing what you did last week to this week. What did you do so well last week that allowed you to have those 3.5 tackles for loss?
I would just say film for sure. Be in the film room, watching Alabama's games from last year, and just seeing tendencies and things that players do to kind of give stuff away kind of earlier. And just preparing mentally, not having a lot of stress on me, and just stretching and preparing like I did any game before I got to college, just doing everything right to make sure that I can play fast and confident.
Colin O'Brien from Jeff City, go ahead.
Hey, Martez, hope you're doing well. Eli was telling us earlier today that nobody played well enough or coached well enough to win the game Saturday, and then that started with him. And you mentioned putting all that behind you and refocusing. Just what are you focused on doing better as a defensive unit, and then I guess individually against Tennessee for this coming week?
I would just say just playing fast from the first play. I would say last week I felt like we started to kind of get in the groove in the second half. So I would just say just starting the first play and finishing the last play the same way that we started to play towards the end of last game. And, just believing in each other and playing for each other and not having any personal or selfish goals in mind, just playing for the brother next to you and playing for the Tigers.
Kyle Pinnell, go ahead.
Hi, Martez. You did some track and field before coming to Mizzou, and I'm just kind of curious how, just having that background, how is that translated to the football field, not just with your speed and explosiveness, but also your mentality and your approach to the game?
I often said in high school that I feel like track is one of the hardest sports in the world, even harder than football mentally, because every week you're going to be leaving the meet that you showed up to at 7 in the morning. You'll be leaving that at about 9 at night, and you know that you're going to redo that every week, as many events as you have. So I would just say from a mental standpoint, doing that and just crossing barriers and that, and just, I don't know, it just makes me feel like it really helped my mental toughness, and conditioning, and just knowing when I'm tired that I can still perform. So, yeah.
Mitch 40 from Power Mizzou, you're up.
Martez, how is this strong safety spot that kind of plays down the box some? How is that different than maybe what you did last season? And what about that position do you feel like really suits your skill set?
I've always been I really like to tackle. I like to tackle a lot. I feel like it's one of my key, I don't know the word, advantages. I don't know. But yeah, I like to tackle a lot. Block shedding is another specialty. That's what I'm looking for. Another specialty of mine, I would say. I like to think myself as good at getting off blocks. So I feel like that's kind of what that position's for, and just having good eyes and staying disciplined. So I feel like last year, I mean, I could still go back now and play the position I was playing last year. It's just obviously we have some of the best safeties in the country alongside me. So I'm just happy with the role that I could get, and just I'm just happy to be a starter and being able to have my 111 on the defense, you know.
So each Terada, Kansas City Star, go ahead.
Martez, just wondering, what do you see from Tennessee this year, and what do you remember from last year when they got you guys pretty good through the air?
I would just say that they're obviously not as talented as Alabama. You know what I mean? There's probably one of the best teams we're going to see all year. But they are a really good football team, and it's just going to be about, like I said earlier, it's going to be about us just playing from the first play to the last play, like the way that we know we can. And, I mean, after us playing one of the best teams in the country last year, our first game, I feel like that's really in our advantage. And we know, like, because of things that we did well, other schools aren't going to be able to replicate because so a lot of them just don't have the guys, you know what I mean? So I feel like just playing to the best of our ability and not beating ourselves in a lot of ways with explosive plays or penalties and stuff.
Ben Durando, you're up.
Hey, Martez, I was just wondering what it feels like, or if there's any sort of emotional rush when you end up with a tackle for loss against a team like Alabama. Does that compare differently to making a big play against anyone else? What sort of goes through you?
No, I mean, it feels pretty awesome just to be able to play on Faroe Field, you know what I mean, in front of my friends and family, in front of my town. I wouldn't really put a lot of focus on the Alabama part. I mean, because it's going to feel just as awesome to make that play against anybody, you know what I mean? So, no, I wouldn't say as much Alabama, but it is like a really tremendous and like huge honor to be able to play in front of my family and friends and just my community.
Get the Urban Power Mizzou, you're up.
Yeah, Martez, I know you guys try to approach every game the same way, but this season with nothing but SEC games and no, I guess, quote unquote, weeks off for easier games. I mean, what changes day to day as far as preparation, recovery, things like that?
I think you have to just realize that you don't get any days back. You know what I mean? So if it's an off day, then you really gotta get off your feet and just take care of your body. You know what I mean? Because you're back. I feel like this is as close to an NFL schedule as we're gonna see. You know what I mean? Especially and also like for the guys who plan to play on Sundays. You know what I mean? Just being able to see like, hey, can I stick with this season and stick with this process? Because I mean, you have a good team every week. You know what I mean? So I feel like just taking every day, taking advantage every day of practice, advantage every day in the film room, advantage of every day in the recovery aspect, I feel like it's going to be a major key to having your players with you all season, you know? So I feel like there's going to be a lot of teams that, you know what I mean, who guys aren't going to make it past week 6 and 7 just because their bodies are just so beat up, you know what I mean? So I feel like just really taking care of yourself is going to be a big advantage for a lot of teams.
Andrew Kaufman, KMIZ, go ahead.
Martez, I'm just curious, playing on the road and you're going to Neyland Stadium, a place that normally has 100,000 plus fans, and of course that won't be the case this week. Do you think there's any advantages to that, to being the road team, playing against Tennessee when there aren't any fans really?
I mean, yeah, I would just say, because I mean, I feel like just in sports in general, you know what I mean, playing at your home is always going to be an advantage just because you have the energy of your fans. I mean, you're comfortable, you practice on that field, you know what I mean? But I was saying early in the year when I found out about the schedule that there's not going to be that advantage anymore. So it's just going to be like hype is not going to be any team, you know what I mean? It's just going to be about performing, you know what I mean, and just everybody doing their job. So, yeah, I would say that I guess it's an advantage in either favor, you know what I mean? It's just going to be about, like I said, guys showing up.
And it looks like we'll end it with Bennett Durando, St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Go ahead.
Martez, there were a lot of guys who sort of talked about how you stepped up this offseason as a vocal leader, especially with the march and things like that. I'm curious if there's been a moment this offseason or recently where you feel like you've become an on-the-field leader too?
Yeah, I would say, that just like through fall camp, I would say that I started to get comfortable with, correcting guys or speaking up on the field and like making sure guys are right, really communicating. And I feel like that the last game that just happened, I feel like really helped me do that too. Be able to like show my teammates like, hey, I belong here, and they believe that the whole time. But I feel like it's just able for me to have that confidence, like, hey, like, I can make big plays and I can be a leader on this defense as well. So it's actually crazy you asked that because back in quarantine, like I think I want to say March, February, we all, our defensive coordinator or my safeties coach, Ryan Walters, he asked us to do our season goals. And one of my goals actually was just to earn the trust and respect from my coaches and my teammates, just because like I didn't play that much, last year as a freshman. So just being able to have my teammates feel comfortable and know that I'm going to do my job to the best of my ability every play, I feel like is really, really awesome.
All right, that is Mizzou safety Martez Manuel, sophomore. Missouri brought back 8 starters on defense. He was one of the new guys, and he was one of the best players, I think, on that defensive side of the ball last week. So good sign for the Tigers there that he got off to a good start. I think this week, less of a challenge for the Missouri secondary, less of a challenge for every position group, quite honestly, because, look, Tennessee is a solid team. Tennessee ain't Alabama. Missouri ain't Alabama. That's that much is pretty obvious. So we're going to jump in, guys, to some of your questions and comments here for a few minutes. Appreciate Martez Manuel, fill in a few minutes and give me a chance to finish my Burger Smokehouse bacon and eggs and tater tots for breakfast. Again, Burgers is the official smokehouse, not only of Mizzou Athletics, but the sponsor of the At-Home Tailgate show all season long here at PowerMizzou.com. And they are family-owned and managed by third and fourth generations of the Burger family in California, Missouri. What makes them unique? They have dry-cured meats. That's country-cured ham, dry-cured bacon, barbecue meats. I think, by the way, I saw something about this being like Country Ham Month. I don't really know if that's a thing, but, try out some Burgers Country Ham at some point. They've got brine-cured meat, hickory smoked ham, hickory smoked turkey. They use a natural smoke process over real wood chips, no liquid smoke, so you can really taste the natural flavor. Here's where you can get smokehouse meats, Burger Smokehouse meats throughout the state of Missouri. Deerbergs, Schnucks, Price Chopper, Woods, C&R, Hy-Vee, Gerbs, Walmart, Hen House. There are probably more. Those are the ones I know. So check them out. Thanks to Burgers for making this possible and helping us out throughout the season, and also for providing this week breakfast for your host. That's me. So want to jump in immediately to now your guys' questions, comments, things of that nature. And again, want to say if you weren't here last week, welcome for the first time. And you are going to have to stick with me a little bit, moving some things around the screen and stuff. You guys are going to see that live because I'm a one-man production crew at this point in time. We're running it all in real time, so there is going to be a little bit of movement. Sometimes, we might have to make an adjustment on the fly. Something might happen, but we're figuring it out as we go. We hope this week's better than last week, and thanks for joining us. And Bradley wants to know the biggest key to this game. I mean, I think getting off the field on third down is probably a big deal. They didn't do that at all against Alabama last week. Alabama was able to sustain drives. They had a 3-and-out on their first drive, and then I don't think they punted again with Mac Jones in the football game. Scored, I believe, on 4 straight possessions to end the first half. And look, this is not a team that's equipped to go out and win games 38-35. Missouri's just not going to do that against most teams. So the defense is going to have to hold the opposition to, 17, 21, 24, I think most weeks to give Missouri a good shot. So it's much easier to do if you get a few 3-and-outs, if you can get off the field on 3rd and 4 at midfield, get a punt. Missouri didn't do a great job of that last week. That was one thing that Eli Drinkwitz specifically said they needed to do this week. It'd also be easy to say they need to contain the Tennessee passing game because while it's really not great, Tennessee threw for 415 yards against Missouri last year. Jared Garantano had probably his best game of his long career at Tennessee against Mizzou last year. So that is another key. All right, Cam wants to know, does Kiki Chisholm see more targets today after his post-game comments last week? And I want to say, first of all, that I think we make too big a deal of a frustrated comment, something just said out of emotion after the game. For those who don't know, Chisholm was asked after the Alabama game, hey, you didn't see the ball much early. You got a few more targets late. Did you make any adjustments as the game went on to get more involved? And his answer was, I can't throw the ball to myself, or at least that was part of his answer. And, that was obviously tweeted out. I think, and look, the media's at fault here, right? We complain when these guys say nothing. And then when we say something, we put it out there and we put him on blast. He's right. He can't throw the ball to himself, even though Sean Robinson at one point last week did manage to do that. But probably just, look, the kid was frustrated. He caught 2 passes on, I think, 3 targets throughout the game. It happens. Eli Drinkwitz took exception with it, chastised us on the Tuesday media call, not us specifically, but us as a group. Whatever, that's his right. It's not really a battle worth fighting, especially publicly, but that's his call. Every coach in his first Power 5 job adjusts to it. Gary Pinkel had some rough moments with the media early on, especially in 2004. Barry Odom took a while to learn how to deal with the media. I think the Auburn rant would be the most specific. And it's an adjustment for Eli Drinkwitz, too, going from Appalachian State, where I don't know how many people covered the game or covered the team. I'm going to guess there were fewer than 30 people on his Tuesday media call, which is about what he averages here in the SEC. So, I don't really think it's a big deal. I don't think it's something that's going to cause Kiki Chisholm to see the ball any more or any less, play any more or any less. He had more snaps than any wide receiver last week. I really just don't think it's anything anybody needs to be concerned about. Stryker wants to know how much you see Connor Bazelak. I think you see Connor Bazelak about the same amount you saw last week. Before the last drive of the game, Sean Robinson had 56 snaps and Bazelak had 5. There is no question who the starting quarterback on this team is. It's Sean Robinson. I mean, there's no two ways about it. Connor Bazelak, I think, is playing, yes, because he has potential and they do want to see what he can do. But I think more than that, he is playing because this year's different than any other year. And what happens if Sean Robinson gets COVID? You got to have your guy have had some snaps. You've got to have him used to it a little bit, and Bazelak hadn't had many and was coming off a torn ACL. So you have to get him on the field. But I think he gets a couple series in the in the first half, second quarter. And then, maybe in the second half. But if Robinson's playing well, no, honestly, I think you should hope you don't see much of Connor Bazelak because that means Sean Robinson is getting the job done. Kyle wants to know how many carries Roundtree gets today. I think the goal should be 20 for Larry Roundtree in every game. He's a guy who gets better the more he runs the ball. Drinkwitz did say last week that was one thing he would do differently, is he would give Roundtree more carries because he did well against Alabama. He averaged, I think he had 14 carries for 67 yards. So he averaged almost 5 yards a carry, which against a defense like Alabama is absolutely nothing to be ashamed of, and something I think Missouri should lean on a little bit more, certainly, as the season goes on. And we got one more on Larry Roundtree here before we jump into another interview for you guys. Justin wants to know 115 yards for Roundtree. That seems high. Tennessee's run defense was decent last week. Seems high to me, especially because I expect Sean Robinson to be involved in the ground game. I'd go somewhere closer to 90 for Roundtree, and I think that'd be a good number. I think that would be a good sign for Missouri if he could do that. So had a lot of offensive questions there, not a lot of defensive questions, which kind of makes sense because there are more questions about Missouri's offense than the defense right now. But every week we get a chance to talk to defensive coordinator Ryan Walters. And we're not going to bring that to you necessarily every week on the show. We'd like to branch out and have some other assistants too, but we're really kind of at the mercy of who Missouri provides us. So going to give you a chance to hear from the defensive coordinator, Ryan Walters, coming out of Alabama and headed to Knoxville.
Hey, Ryan. You saw Mac Jones get into a little bit of a rhythm in that game on Saturday, and Coach Drinkwitz has talked about the third down defense a little bit. I'm curious, if you chalk it up more to pass rush needing to get to the quarterback a little sooner or coverage or kind of a combination of the two.
They'll chalk it up to, that's a really, really good offensive line. It's a really good quarterback and two of the best receivers in the country. They made plays. You got to tip your hat to them. When we pressured and hit him, they scored a touchdown. We were able to sack him. In the second half, we had him we had 17 doubled one time for a touchdown. There's a reason why they are where they are, and I think those two receivers got a chance to go in the first round. You know what I mean? So you can't overreact. Obviously, you have to address issues that you saw and correct technique. But you can't. I don't want to overreact off of one game against arguably the best offense in the country.
Gabe Bjarman, Power Mizzou, go ahead.
You're muted, Gabe. There you go.
Well, I was unmuted, but now I'm unmuted twice. But you alluded to it a little bit, but especially against that receiving core, young guys like Ennis and Ish Burdine, after looking at the film, what did you think of the way they held up on Saturday?
I was impressed, man. I'm excited about the progress that I think they'll make this season. They went out there and they competed. Obviously, Alabama made their fair share of plays, as I'm sure they will the rest of the year. But it's definitely something to build off of. Just in terms of the stage not being too big for them, you didn't see them hesitate or get down on the sidelines. And then in the second half, I felt like we played better. I thought the first half, we started fast, obviously, with the 3-and-out and Tyree, making a big hit on Devontae Smith, which was huge. And then I felt like the speed of the game was a little bit of a shock. It's hard to simulate game speed before game one, especially when that game one is somebody of Alabama's caliber. But I thought they settled in, like I said, in the second half, and were able to get some stops. We got a turnover. Had a short field and held them to a field goal there at the end. So there's definitely stuff to build off of. But we corrected the mistakes that we made. I was happy that we didn't have that many mental errors. It was more technique errors. So not really cutting guys loose or running a wrong stunt or anything like that. So all the stuff that we can do to correct it, we will. And was also happy with the way we tackled, especially going into week one against guys like Najee Harris and Jalen Waddle and such. So
Soichi Terada, Kansas City Star, you're up.
Hey, Ryan, just what do you see from Tennessee and how much you look at last year when they beat you guys through the air pretty good?
Yeah, last year was a struggle. AC, our starting corner, goes down in warm-ups, and then our other starting corner, Jarvis Ware, gets hurt in the first drive. So we were kind of limited on packages and play calls. But you look at them this year, they obviously the quarterback is back. I feel like he's been there forever now. Offensive line is big and athletic. The receivers, they played last year, obviously weren't the marquee guys, in number 1 and number 15 last year, but guys that have had quality reps and have made plays and are bigger receivers. So yeah, we're gonna have a challenge on our hands. They're ranked for a reason. They're a really good football team that's on a hot streak right now. I think their streak is the longest in the country right now. And so, you know, we definitely got our hands full. Got much respect for Coach Chaney and what he does offensively. You know, he's a methodical play caller. You know, he doesn't take negative yardage plays. Doesn't you know, he's a little more conservative in terms of when he's going to take shots and get aggressive. And as a result, they don't turn the ball over a whole lot. And he understands who his roster is and what they can do, and doesn't ask them to be somebody that they're not. So, you know, like I said, we've got our work cut out for us, but I'm excited to go compete on Saturday again.
Dave Matter, St. Louis Post-Dispatch.
Ryan, looking back at the Alabama game, how did you feel like some of your guys did kind of putting pressure on the pocket? It seemed like Trey Williams was back there a few times, and Jeff Coat, when he was on the field, seemed like he made an impact a little bit.
Yeah, no, I was happy with especially the way those two guys played. And listen, you know, Alabama gave up 11 sacks last year. So the fact that we were able to get back there and hit him, you know, I think that trend will carry us through the rest of the season. Like I said, I don't want to overreact to a week one deal, especially with who we were playing against and the uncertainties going into the season. But I was really happy with Trey's and Jeff Coat, just the energy, the physicality with which he played. You know, I think he's got a chance to be a really good player for us.
Peter Ball from The Athletic, go ahead.
Yeah, Ryan, I guess you kind of know what you have in Nick Bolton, but what did you think of the other linebackers that played?
You know, Devin, I think if he was sitting in front of you, he'd tell you he wished he played a little bit better. You know, I think he got us lined up and he was in the right spots. Cam Wilkins came in and he did some good things. You know, he was the reason we got the sack fumble. He picked the left tackle and you know, knocked him on the ground. That was big time for us. He was physical, so you know those guys have been sharing reps throughout this week of practice, and both of them are hungry and you know I didn't feel like the game was too big for either one of them. And so you know obviously everybody's got work to do, and but those guys are trending in the right direction, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the season.
Max Baker from the Missourian.
Hey, Coach. It's sort of different type of question, but like with the limited contact between like your position group and the coaching staff while you're on the plane and in the hotel, is there stuff that you have to get done before you leave that you would normally do once you're on the road, or like stuff within the coaching staff that you would normally like meet with or talk about before, and now you have to change that?
No, because we still have the same amount of contact. It would just be socially distanced, you know, throughout our meetings. So, you know, it's still the same schedule, same meeting structure. You just everybody's just wearing a mask and spaced out a little bit wider than normal. So, but operations going as usual.
Colin O'Brien, Jeff City News Tribune.
Hey, Coach Walters. Thanks for doing this. Hope you're well.
Yeah.
I know Trey Smith is a name that stands out for Tennessee, and who knows if or when Cade Mays will play this season. But do you anticipate you'll see a line as talented, offensive line as talented 1 through 5 as you did against Alabama Saturday?
I don't know, man. They're pretty good. But Tennessee is talented, and obviously, you know, we have a 10-game SEC schedule, so there's all of them going to be talented. And I don't want to make any of the rest of them mad. So. They're all good, and they're all going to be a challenge. And but I know our guys are going to go compete and look forward to the challenges every week.
Gabe Jarman, Mizzou.
Yeah, Ryan, one of the things we've heard, and especially in the NFL, but with these empty stadiums or smaller crowds, is how much easier it is for offenses to communicate. As a defensive coordinator, do you see, I mean, I know it's 1 week, but do you think there's any difference for a defense playing in front of so many fewer people, and how much easier it is for an offense to kind of talk about everything?
Yeah, well, it's also easier for us to communicate too. You know what I mean? I can yell out things from the sideline and they can hear me, and that is not the case. I mean, my voice doesn't get that loud anyways. So it has been nice to be like, hey, watch the deep shot here, and it's a deep shot, and we're there. You know what I mean? but it is a little bit different. You got to bring your own injury. The sideline is your home sideline is more important now than ever. Just the energy from the guys that aren't in the game to bring the juice and energy that the crowd would normally provide. I did think on Saturday night we had a good turnout despite or in spite of the regulations. You could still feel the excitement around the new zoo, and I was definitely appreciative of that. As were the guys. So it sucks. I'm sure it would have been a sellout crowd in a normal situation. But selling out with what we got, that's I'm happy with it and grateful and thankful for it.
Next up is Mitch Forty Pop Zoo.
Yeah, Ryan, one more for you. I know you talked a little bit last week about listing one of the sort of defensive ends as a buck outside linebacker now as he's standing up more. I'm curious, are those two spots, that outside linebacker and then the defensive end on the other side, are those interchangeable from a personnel standpoint, or what are kind of the differences between those two spots in your mind?
No, the buck is its own specialized position. You know what I mean? He'll never have his hand down playing a 4-eye. Just the techniques and schematically what we're doing with those two positions are too different. They have to meet together and in the same room because some of the line stunts kind of coincide with each other. Our buck is as you guys saw is more of a backer now. He's not only just lined up to the boundary, he'll be to the field also, just depending on the call and the formation. So. That's why we classified it as such, because it is such a different position. And again, every year you kind of got to evolve to what your roster is, and that's what we've done since I've been the coordinator here. Is every year there's going to be some carryover from the year before, but it's also going to look a little bit different. Just because you got to adapt, you got to evolve in order to put the best product you can on the field.
So each try against the start.
Yeah, Ryan, I was just curious, from week 1 to week 2, what do you usually see just the defense cleaning up more, whether that's from, tackling or just technique or anything like that?
Yeah, I think the consistency of the technique. We tackle as well as we did Saturday all year. I'll be happy. You know what I mean? They didn't have a whole lot of explosive plays. We didn't have a whole lot of missed tackles. You know what I mean? And that's like I said, that's a really, really good offense, really good skill players. We have to make some plays in space, and we made them. So if we tackle that way, I'll be happy. But the most improvement I think you see is the consistency of doing your job in and out, and understanding the importance of the details and the techniques of playing your position. Because when you don't do that, when you're a step off or an alignment off, you can get exposed when you're playing a really good team, and all the teams we're going to play from here on out are really good teams. So it's awesome because you, as a competitor, you want that challenge, and you want to go play against the best and be tested. But at the same time, you got to understand that the details and the importance of playing every play like it's the most important play is paramount in order for you to be able to succeed at the level in which you want to.
All right, that is Ryan Walters, Missouri defensive coordinator. He did have a little bit more to say, but that was a 20-minute interview, and I didn't want to keep you guys on there for all 20 minutes. Wanted to come back, make sure we get everything in this show that we want to get in. Once again, this is the Burger Smokehouse at-home tailgate. You can get Burger Smokehouse meats all over the state of Missouri. They are located out of California, Missouri, family-owned business, 4th generation. Running things now, I had some Burger Smokehouse bacon this morning with my pregame meal. There is a lot more of that in my deep freeze, along with pulled pork, ribs, brisket, ham, pretty much anything you want. You can get from Burger Smokehouse. So check them out. Support a sponsor. Support us. Subscribe to the channel. Give this a like. Spread the word what we're doing every Saturday. You guys aren't going to be able to go to most of the games. So we're going to be here just hanging out with you for, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours every Saturday, watching Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz navigate through this 2020 season. Want to get to a few more of the comments, questions you guys have right now leading up to this one. Missouri and Tennessee an hour and 3 minutes away on SEC Network. We're going to be here with you. I'm going to bring Mitch Forty here in about half an hour. We'll lead you guys up to kickoff, take a break right around 10:50, probably get reset for kickoff at 11 a.m., the Colin Gentry on the call game watch along. But Andy's asking about Messiah Swinson and whether he played at all last week. It was all Daniel Parker and Nico Hay at tight end. I just looked up the numbers while that Walters interview was going. I believe that Parker had 33 snaps and Nico Hay had 28. That adds up to 61. That means there was 14 snaps where Missouri didn't have a tight end on the field. But at least according to the numbers we had, Messiah Swinson didn't see the field. Logan Christopherson might have seen a few. I can't remember that offhand, but didn't look like Swinson was in the game plan or in the rotation last week. Doesn't mean he won't be this week, but as far as we know right now, he didn't. Steve wants to know if they're going to get the ball to Chris Drain, Jalen Knox, and Tyler Beatty. Knox and Beatty both got the ball a fair amount. I mean, Tyler Beatty had a 54-yard touchdown catch last week. Jalen Knox led the team with 5 catches, 63 yards. Chris Abrams-Drain was in on punt return. I thought did a good job just catching the ball and hanging on to it. The one fumble on the punt, I believe, was Barrett Bannister. Drain also had 1 carry for 3 yards, picked up a first down on it, I believe. I could be remembering incorrectly on that. But he was involved a little bit, but he's a true freshman, first game against Alabama, kid from Alabama, by the way. So probably a few nerves and such there, but I think we will see him as we go on. Bradley's asking about one of the things that I talked about a lot this week. You saw a lot of sweeps, a lot of side-to-side action in that game last week, some speed options, some regular option. It didn't really work. I think that's Drinkwitz's offense, and so I think you run your offense, but I don't think it had a great chance to succeed against Alabama. Alabama's just too fast. Frankly, Tyler Beatty and Jalen Knox were the only 2 guys I saw that looked like they could run with Alabama offensively on a consistent basis. So, yes, I think you'll see a little bit more north-south, but you're going to see that side-to-side stuff. That is part of the offense, and you're going to see the speed option in the quarterback run game now. Just because it did, kind of like Ryan Walters was saying about his pass rush, just because certain things didn't work last week against the best team in the country doesn't mean they're not going to work. Jackson, I don't know if I should answer that question or not, but I will say that there are a lot of people that have covered both leagues that think Tennessee and Nebraska are very similar fan bases. Now, Nebraska was better, I think, in the time when I grew up watching college football than Tennessee was, because Nebraska competed for far more national titles, but Tennessee did win one, in 99 when T. Martin was the quarterback. And they are both still 2 of the top 10 winningest programs in college football. They just aren't what they used to be. Tennessee looks closer to getting back than Nebraska. But look, Vol Twitter is a real thing. If you haven't experienced it, hey, good for you, honestly. Stryker wants to know if we know the health of the cornerbacks. We don't know if Jarvis Ware is in Knoxville or not, because we're not in Knoxville. Now, I talked to somebody who is in Knoxville, and he said they don't know if he's in Knoxville either, and that's not somebody with the team. That is somebody who's just there. Nobody knows yet. I would imagine Missouri should be on the field for pregame warmups either now or pretty soon. There are probably some tweets out there. I frankly don't have time to scroll through all of Twitter while I'm doing this show. We don't know if Jarvis Ware is going to play. We don't know if he's on the trip. We don't know any of that. If he's not, it's going to be Ennis Rakestraw and Ish Burdine as the top 2. Those 2 guys had the most and second most snaps at cornerback last week. So true freshman, redshirt freshman. I thought they held up pretty well considering the opposition. Adam Sparks is your 3rd guy, and he brings experience and you know what you're going to get out of Adam Sparks. So every week on this show, one of the things we're going to do is talk to somebody who covers the opponent. Look, I know surface level stuff about Tennessee, but I'm not going to know as much as somebody who sees them every single day. And one of my favorite things, maybe my favorite thing about Tennessee Week every year, is that means we get to catch up with our old friend Blake Topmeyer. Blake spent a few years in Columbia at the Columbia Daily Tribune. He was on the Preps beat, and he covered Missouri football for a year or two before moving to the Knoxville News Sentinel. And earlier this week, Blake was kind enough to take some time out of his day, and want you to hear that now on the Burgers Smokehouse at-home tailgate. All right, Blake, Missouri coming to Tennessee this weekend, 11 a.m. And I laughed a little bit. A couple of the questions this week were, Neyland Stadium normally has 100,000 people in it, and it's not going to this week. I laughed because I personally haven't seen Neyland Stadium with 100,000 people in it. I mean, it's not quite been that. It's impressive. But it hasn't been full in a while. But what are the policies there? How many people get to go?
Yeah, it's about 25% of that 102 455 capacity. That's interesting. I'm not sure the capacity is listed at 102 455. I don't know that they could actually fit that many people in there. Like that feels like an antiquated capacity figure, like back when people were like this small.
I mean, they're counting players and media, and they're counting dudes on their boats out there.
I think so, probably. Yeah. Now for Saturday, they're planning on 22 to 24,000. So it'll be interesting because even though, they're not. It's been a while since they've been stuffing 100,000 people in there. It is a pretty loud stadium. I don't think it's the loudest in the SEC. I tend to think Florida's probably the loudest I've been to. There's still a couple in the West I haven't been to, but I think Neyland is up there. It's probably in the top four, I think, of what you can get, especially like a full house in a night game. But obviously, that'll be a different situation with 22,000 people there on a day game on Saturday.
Yeah. Did you go to South Carolina last week?
I did. It was an odd vibe, like a lot of places. Like once the game started, you kind of almost forgot that there's only 15,000 people here and that this game's being played in a pandemic. Like, Sandstorm still played, Tap still waved. There was just a lot fewer than usual. They piped in some crowd noise over the speakers to help it out a little bit. And, it felt like sort of close to a game day atmosphere. The bigger difference was like driving in and then walking up to the stadium. I mean, it felt like a game in an apocalypse or something, or, I said a spring game, but like I've been to spring games with more vibe than was there Saturday. I mean, there were some youths, some college students tailgating, throwing the football around, but not much. I mean, I probably saw maybe like 40 tailgaters on my walk from the parking lot into the stadium. And that
and that's a long walk there.
It is. Yeah. I mean, you get a long chance to see some people, and I didn't see many. That Cockaboose Railroad deal there, with all the train cars near the stadium. That place was pretty well a ghost town. So it was kind of an odd vibe before kickoff.
Yeah, that's what Dave Matter said. And like, look, we've well established. I hang out on YouTube during games. I don't go to games anymore. That's not a thing. But Dave said, when he was walking in last week, like the parking lot it was completely empty. It was like walking in to cover a practice. And so, but he said the same thing once the game started. It was kind of football. Obviously they played at the same time as Missouri. I didn't watch any of that game last week. I looked at the box score and if you just look at that box score, you couldn't tell who won. Like there was not really one thing on either side that stood out. Everything was fine. What was kind of your 30,000 foot view of that game?
Yeah, it's sort of a good, bad, and ugly situation. Like, Tennessee did some things well, but I think the thing they did best was didn't make any catastrophic mistakes. Like South Carolina threw a pick six, and then also when South Carolina had an opportunity to get the ball back with 90 seconds to go and try to make a drive to win the game, a punt caromed off one of their blockers' legs, and Tennessee jumped on the ball. So, South Carolina had two costly miscues, whereas Tennessee didn't play great, but they didn't have any mistakes that really bit them. Defensively, Tennessee, I thought, looked really good at the cornerback position and bringing some pressure off the edge. Through the middle of the defense, there were a lot of flaws that I thought were exposed. And then offensively, I mean, Jarrett Garantano at this point in his career, we pretty well know what he is. He's
well, he's been there 9 years. We should know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And I mean, he had one of the best games of his career against Missouri last year, but by and large, he's been pretty average throughout his career. And he was fine on Saturday. He wasn't nearly as bad as 80% of Vols fans think. But he also wasn't good either. He was just fine. The offensive line was supposed to be the backbone of the team. It was just fine. So, it was a lot of sort of what you said. Tennessee was fine on Saturday, and they were in South Carolina, I guess, was a little bit less fine.
The offensive line was what I mean. That is probably their best player is an offensive lineman in Trey Smith. And now just here in the last 12 hours or so, 24 hours, they had Cade Mays, the Georgia transfer, who, correct me if I'm wrong, it seemed for like 4 months, like at some point he was going to get approved and become eligible, but it was just waiting for when that's happened. So, I mean, does he slide into the starting lineup and help that line?
I think he does. I think he'll play somewhere on the right side of the line. I would guess at right tackle because Tennessee had more trouble at the tackle position than they did at guard on Saturday. And so, I think you'll have Smith on one side of the line, Mays on the other. Smith will be at left guard. I think Mays will either be at right guard or right tackle. And so you've got Trey Smith's an All-America candidate. He's maybe the best offensive guard in the country. If not the best, he's on the short list. And then Mays is a first team All SEC caliber type player, 18 games of starting experience at Georgia. And that was obviously two really good Georgia offensive lines. And he was starting as a freshman, or at least a part-time starter as a freshman. And then again last year, he can play anywhere on the line. His versatility is, one of his strengths, but you try not to make too much of a transfer that's not a quarterback because, one guy can only impact the game so much. But like for Tennessee's offense to be really good this season, I think it has to have an elite offensive line because, the shortcomings of the quarterback position are well documented. And so I think it has to be a team that leans on its line. And so I do think like as much as a transfer offensive lineman can be important, like this is as important as a transfer offensive lineman can be.
Other side of the ball, I know DeAndre Johnson had like 2.5 sacks. They were decent. I didn't learn much of anything about Missouri, really on either side of the ball, but especially on offense last week because just there wasn't a lot that was going to work. They were playing head and shoulders the best team in the SEC. They moved the ball a little bit, but it wasn't great. Tennessee defense, I've said Missouri has to win games this year, like 21-17, 24-21. What about Tennessee defensively? And is this kind of a game where they go into it going, look, we ought to be able to kind of hold these guys down?
It's interesting because if you look back at Tennessee's 6-game winning streak to end last season, there are a few things that went into that. But I think the biggest thing was the defense was playing extremely well. I mean, the defense fueled that winning streak for Tennessee to close the year. And they brought 8 starters back off the defense. So that's the good news for Tennessee. The downside for Tennessee is the 3 starters that they lost were their 3 best players from the defense. You had Daniel Batuli in the middle. You had Darrell Taylor bringing pressure off the edge. And then you had Nigel Warrior, a first-team All-SEC safety. And so those losses are kind of glaring, and I thought showed up on Saturday. I mean, I talked about the middle of the defense being an area that South Carolina was able to pick on. Well, you take Batuli and Nigel Warrior out of the middle of the defense, and I thought that was sort of exposed, along with the fact that Tennessee's starting nickelback was unable to play. So, you add all that up, and it created a bit of an issue. But there's still some good pieces on defense. I think their cornerbacks are pretty solid, and Bryce Thompson and Alontae Taylor. And I was impressed by the pass rush they brought on Saturday. I really was not expecting their pass rush to be that involved as they were in pressuring Colin Hill.
Yeah. So you said the most important thing about that winning streak at the end of last year was the defense. I would argue the most important thing about that winning streak was the schedule. I made a comparison on our show last night. 2019 Tennessee is 2018 Missouri. I mean, they finished on a 6-game winning streak, and you can't take that away. They beat Kentucky. Kentucky's a solid to good team. But other than that, I mean, it was UAB, it was Missouri, it was Vandy, it was, Indiana. So now I want to say, just because 2019 Tennessee was 2018 Missouri doesn't mean 2020 Tennessee is last year's Missouri team. Maybe they carry that over. But is that what this year's about, is finding out if that win streak was real or was just a product of, hey, you're the least bad of the not real good teams?
That's a big storyline, I think, this season is finding that out, because you're right. I guess everything's sort of on a shifting scale, right? Like, after Tennessee started the season with losses to Georgia State and BYU, you're like, well, they might win 3 games this year.
Right. Those were the optimists that were saying.
Right. Yeah. There were some people in Knoxville that were saying at that point 1-11. So then you sort of reset the scale, and then when they finish on a 6-game winning streak, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that looks pretty good. But yeah, you're right. Once you start breaking it down, they didn't beat any ranked opponents during that streak. They beat teams that at the beginning of the season you would have said these are games they need to win. Right. But now going forward, what happens? Because there's 5 ranked opponents on this schedule, that leaves no margin for error. So there's really 2 things I'm interested in this season, like from the 10,000-foot view thing. Number one, Tennessee finished 3rd in the East last year. And I said going into last season, there was always questions about, well, can Tennessee catch Georgia and Florida? And I'm like, Georgia and Florida, like, they got to separate themselves from South Carolina, Missouri, and Kentucky first. And so last year, at least they did that. They finished 3rd in the East, so they broke away from the pack. But now, number one is, can you still be ahead of that pack? But then number 2, can you actually close the gap with Georgia and Florida? Because if you look at those Georgia and Florida games last year, and Tennessee got steamrolled. So, are they still at least the 3rd best team in the East? I think they are. But are they any closer to Tennessee and Georgia? I'm not sure.
Right. Well, and the dirty little secret, even in the SEC, which likes to tell you that their 14th best team is like the 16th best team in America, but all you really have to do to have a decent program is beat the bad teams. I mean, this year is a little bit different because there are no non-conference layups, but you go out and go 3-1 or 4-0 in the non-conference, dude, all you got to do is beat like Vandy, Arkansas, Mississippi State, and whether it's Missouri, South Carolina, whoever, and all of a sudden you're staring at 7 wins, beat a bad team in a bowl game. You just went 8-5. And I know that's not the standard in Knoxville, but I'm just saying the good teams, they beat bad teams. The great teams beat the good teams, but the good teams just beat the bad teams.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Tennessee can go out in a normal 12-game schedule and go 9-3 if they lose to Georgia, Florida, and Alabama every year. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that leaves no margin for error. But if you go out and beat all the other 9 teams, which Tennessee would say on paper they feel like they should, then okay, you win 9 games, or maybe there's one top 10 non-conference team on your schedule or something. Tennessee was supposed to play Oklahoma this year. Of course, maybe Oklahoma isn't what we thought they were, but what I'm saying, like, maybe there's one non-conference game. You still win 8 games. I mean, Tennessee, this is going to sound like a Tennessee apologist, but it is tough for them, the fact that, Alabama's their crossover game every year. So in some ways you feel like they start the season 0-1.
Right.
But, beyond that, yeah, I mean, you could win 8 games every year just by beating the teams you look down on the schedule and say, okay, yeah, they can beat those 8 teams.
I mean, my favorite thing about the SEC since Missouri joined is literally that Tennessee fought to keep that game. Like, dude, get Alabama off my schedule as soon as you can, right? Give me anybody but them. But good for them, man. Shoot for the stars. It was interesting. I just looked at their schedule. So, like you said, 5 ranked teams, but it's set up in a really weird way. I mean, after Missouri, it's number 4 Georgia, then Kentucky, which is a good team but not ranked, then number 2 Alabama, then Arkansas. It's almost back and forth every week. So I don't know that there can be look-ahead games in week 2 in such a weird season, but any thought that, hey, Tennessee's thinking about Georgia next week and Missouri takes advantage of that?
You know, it's funny because earlier this week when I was talking with our columnist, John Adams, about podcast ideas for this week, I thought, do we discuss whether this is a trap game for Tennessee? And of course, trap game is like, what is that anyway? Like, what is a trap game? Like, they're all trap games, right? Like, there's someone there waiting to beat you. It's almost like, I think it's one of those things that like we've sort of created to talk about in these games that like aren't really all that exciting on paper. And so it's like, ooh, trap game. I mean, that's possible. I think in a season like this, though, I don't know, because, the coaches always try to pound in their head like, oh, every team in the SEC is tough. And I don't think the players probably believe that. Right. But I do think in a season like this, at the very least, like you might be thinking, well, we can't afford to lose games against teams that we think we should beat. Because if you do that, okay, well, Georgia's next week, so that could go downhill fast. So, if there is any temptation to overlook opponent, maybe it's that like you can't afford to overlook an opponent this year because then Georgia's, waiting the following week. So, but I don't know. I mean, what do you think? Do you think trap games really exist, or do you think it's just something we just sort of make up?
Well, I think they exist in that these kids are 20 years old and they just naturally look across at the uniform on the other side of the field and go, oh, well, we should beat them by showing up. I thought the unfortunate thing for Eli Drinkwitz was that he drew the one coach in America that wasn't going to let that happen to his team coming off a pandemic, in week one. I mean, look, I don't know if LSU got caught sleeping or LSU's just not very good. Georgia clearly got caught flat.
Right.
Oklahoma clearly got caught thinking, hey, we have this game won. And that's the difference between Nick Saban, Ed Orgeron, Lincoln Riley, and even Kirby Smart. Nick Saban wasn't going to let that happen to his team. And I don't know where, this is two things. I mean, I don't know where Jeremy Pruitt, I don't know what I think of him as a coach yet. It hadn't been long enough. And Tennessee's favored, but this is not a game that you look at and say, well, if Missouri wins this, it's like the biggest upset of this. It's not like last week. I mean, Missouri should compete in this game, even if they don't win. So,
right. Yeah. That's sort of where I'm at is like, I don't know how good either of these teams are yet. And so, if Tennessee loses Saturday, I think this is a game that Tennessee should win. I don't know that either of these teams is really good, but I think Tennessee's probably got more on paper than what Missouri does. But I just don't know how much difference there is between them. And I don't know that we learned that much about either on Saturday. I mean, you kind of said it, like Missouri going against Alabama, how much really can you learn? And then with Tennessee, like I said, the biggest takeaway for me was that they made fewer mistakes than South Carolina did. And I wrote after the game, like in a season like this, and in a season played in a pandemic, like I don't know if there is any such thing as an ugly win. Like if you beat an SEC team on Saturday during this season, it's a win. Just be quiet and take it, But by normal standards, it wasn't particularly well played football by Tennessee at times on Saturday. But I think I also don't want to hold them to a different standard than everybody else. Like, I think we saw a lot of teams play not great football on Saturday, and I think that's sort of to be expected.
Well, and I think, and I'll get you out of here pretty soon, but I heard the best explanation of things. I was listening to a podcast after the Monday Night Football game, and we get so caught up in what did this team do last week and what did that team do last week, and they're going to play, so what does that mean? Well, all it really means is how does Tennessee match up with Missouri? It doesn't matter what Tennessee did against South Carolina or Missouri did against Alabama. We like to judge based on, okay, here's the last 2 weeks, so here's what we know is going to happen in the next 2 weeks. Well, what if just what Missouri runs matches up really well with Tennessee? It might match up well with Tennessee and not with South Carolina. So we spend all this time predicting what's going to happen, and the truth is, like, we don't know, man. We're just filling time. So Missouri wins this game. Look, Tennessee's a favorite. They ought to win. But Missouri wins this game if what?
I don't know, Gabe. I got to back up. I want you to make that your tagline. I'm just filling time.
I mean, we are. Like,
I love that. We're,
like-
we're just filling time.
what's going to happen this week? Well, hell, I don't know. If I knew, I would move to Vegas.
I know.
I wouldn't be doing this.
Anyway, I was still thinking about that. You're gonna have to re-ask the question.
Just Tennessee obviously is favored and should win this game, but Missouri has a shot to win it if they do what, or maybe it's if Tennessee does what. Because I said last week Alabama has to play a C game or worse. It doesn't matter what Missouri does. I don't think this is that situation, but
Well, I think so much of it, with Tennessee comes down to the quarterback position. As much as I've talked about the offensive line and being a run-dominated team, et cetera, like we've seen Jarrett Garantano on some nights be really, really good. I mean, Missouri fans just have to think back to last season. He threw for over 400 yards. One of the best, maybe the best game in Garantano's career. But like he's also been bad enough to lose to Group of 5 opponents. Now, a lot went into last year's loss to Georgia State, but that was one thing. And so, from every week for Tennessee is always like, is Jekyll or Hyde going to show up at the quarterback position? And can he at least keep them out of mistakes, And then also, like, for Missouri, can they exploit the middle of Tennessee's defense the way that South Carolina did? Because, like, I'm sure Tennessee's going to make some adjustments there. They might make some lineup adjustments, but that's not something I know if you totally solve in 7 days' time. Like, if Missouri can exploit them with some slot receivers over the middle, like that might help make this a pretty good game. So, yeah, I mean, those are things that probably kind of stand out for me. And then also, like, how much impact can one offensive lineman make? Like, does all of a sudden Tennessee's offensive line go from, average to really good? Because if this all of a sudden becomes a really good offensive line, I really like Tennessee's running backs. I think Eric Gray and Ty Chandler are a really solid duo. So if all of a sudden the line's really good, then I think Tennessee could be pretty tough to stop.
all right, man. Well, hey, appreciate you taking some time and enjoy whatever it's going to be. It's going to be weird being in that place with 23,000 people, I'm sure, but enjoy it on Saturday.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Gabe.
All right, have a good one, man. All right, Blake Topmeyer from the Knoxville News Sentinel. Again, he covered Missouri for a few years. He was here in Columbia, and appreciate Blake taking some time. We are now about 35 minutes from kickoff. If the game kicks off at 11, sometimes it's 11:03, sometimes 11:06. Who knows? We're about 35 minutes from kickoff. Mizzou and Tennessee on the SEC Network. We've got about 25 minutes left on this show, and what we're going to do there is bring in Mitchell Forty. There you go, magic of technology. Mitchell Forty is on your screen, and hopefully can hear us, and you can hear him. What's up, Mitch? All right, I cannot hear Mitchell, so I don't know if that's on my end. Somebody shoot me a comment. Let me know if you guys are hearing Mitch or not, because I am not hearing him. All right. We're going to call Mitch back and see if maybe this is on my end. So that's my fault. We'll get that figured out, certainly, before we are done here. But anyway, Missouri and Tennessee, 35 minutes, and Cole Carter sharing a little insight with us. Bobby Lawrence is the first team tackle. So that answers one question. Last week, Bobby Lawrence didn't play. He was there. Mitchell saw him on the sidelines, but he didn't play. So curious if that means he was, I don't know. Maybe he was just hurt, because if he's in quarantine, he's not going to be on the sidelines and at the game. Either way, Zeke Powell played left tackle last week. Looks like it will be this week. Looks like it's going to be Bobby Lawrence for Missouri. So then, as you heard Blake say, Tennessee also get an offensive lineman. All SEC offensive lineman Cade Mays transferred from Georgia last year. I didn't follow the story super closely. I do know that, Tennessee kind of expected him to be ruled eligible and get a waiver all along. It never happened until just this week. Not sure what the delay was, but it has happened. Cade Mays joins Trey Smith, who is probably Tennessee's best player on that offensive line. And that certainly is going to make a difference for Tennessee, which moved the ball, decently last week, certainly, against South Carolina. But could have been better on offense. Like Blake and I were talking about, they were just okay. Like Tennessee, they won the game. They didn't do anything that blew you away, but they did win the game. So they do deserve credit for that. And actually, Tennessee's done a decent amount of that recently. In this 7-game winning streak, they've just they've won close games. It's what Missouri struggled with under Barry Odom a lot, and it really shows you the difference between being a good team and not a very good team. A lot of games come down to one possession, 2 possessions. Tennessee has won those games, so they deserve credit for that. It's also living dangerously at times. Cal wants to know over under 2.5 sacks. They had 2 last week, but it was weird. Like neither one of them really seemed to matter, right? They were late. Mac Jones only got hit once, I think, by Nick Bolton. So, that didn't seem to be they weren't impactful. I know one of them it caused a fumble and all that, but it was 35-6 or something like that. It didn't really matter. So, that's over under 2.5 today. I'm going to go under for now because, again, Cade Mays is being added to what is already a pretty good line. And I don't see it out of Missouri's defensive line, to be honest. I know Walter said he wasn't going to hit the panic button, and I'm not hitting the panic button because of what they did against Alabama, but I need to see it happen before I'm going to count on it happening. Justin, this is kind of along those lines. How much of an advantage does Tennessee have in the trenches, and is it more of a litmus test? I think they have an advantage. I think because that says more what I think about Missouri than what I think about Tennessee. I just have major questions on the line for Missouri on both sides of the football. But yes, it's certainly a better test than Alabama. I mean, Alabama's just trotting out All-Americans on both sides of the line, So better test, but certainly still a test for Missouri. All right, am I crazy for expecting Jalen Knox to be the number 1 receiver this year? And I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to leave that up while we call Mitchell Forty back. You may hear a ringtone. I'm going to try to prevent that, but we'll see. If you guys hear it, you hear it, and I apologize. But again, we're doing this on the fly, and this is how it works. And okay, there's Mitch. So we're going to go to this. Mitch, can you hear us, and can we hear you?
I can hear you all. Can you hear me now?
All right, perfect. That worked out well. Good deal. So technology, hey, we learn as we go. All right, so we're kind of in the midst of answering questions, and the question we have right now is if it's crazy to think Jalen Knox is going to be the leading receiver on this team. And I don't know. What do you think about that?
No, I mean, I don't think it's crazy. I don't know that I'd bet on it at this point. You got to keep in mind he started really well 2 years ago and decently well last season and kind of tapered off. So you want to see a full season from him, but certainly, they're going to find ways to get him the ball. I don't know if he'll run, a ton of downfield stuff. I think Damon Hazelton probably gets similar volume and a little more downfield looks. But I mean, clearly they've said since the start of fall camp they want to get Jalen Knox involved. So yeah.
Okay, moving through. Will Daniel Parker Jr. be targeted more this week? I mean, Trying to predict like who's going to see the ball, I don't think we have any idea. It kind of is predicated on the offense. And I know people hate to hear, hey, take what the defense gives you, but that's what you do. You take what the defense gives you. And if what they're giving you is Kiki Chisholm, you do that. If what they're giving you is hand the ball off 27 times, you do that.
Yeah. I mean, also, when Daniel Parker Jr. got the ball last week, it was always, kind of just quick right behind the line of scrimmage stuff. So I would see that maybe kind of staying about the same, if not a little less, just because, as we said during the midweek show, wouldn't be surprised if they do a little bit more downfield passing. But yeah, you're right. I mean, especially without us, seeing even a second of practice time, it's very hard to predict who's going to end up being more involved in the game plan and stuff like that.
Yeah, and Edmund commented that Daniel Parker needs to actually catch the ball. I mean, that's unfair because I don't think he dropped a pass all last year. He dropped a pass.
Yeah.
Randy Moss dropped passes. Jerry Rice dropped passes. It happens. These players aren't perfect.
Yeah, for sure.
So, okay, moving through comments. Paul wants to know breakout players on offense and defense in this game. So I guess basically who we think could have a big game. So Mitch, I'll let you go first there.
I mean, everything I'm told is that Tennessee struggles to cover the middle of the field. So, I'm going with the combination of Dom Jacinto, Barrett Bannister in the slot, kind of getting some action over the middle of the field on offense. On defense, Ishverdine's getting the start. So I guess I'll go with him because he's going to be out there a lot and he's going to get tested. So, I could see him. I thought he was okay last week against better receivers. So maybe he has a good game.
Yeah, defense, I'm going to go with Trajan Jeffcoat. I just think he's a kid. As we go week by week, he's going to get more time. I mean, he made a play last week. And frankly, Trey Williams played a decent game. I think he's getting I didn't notice him a lot until the third quarter, but played a decent game. Chris Turner is just not a guy that you notice a lot. And I think Missouri's going to get guys out there who are making plays, and I think Trajan Jeffcoat could do that. Offensively, who knows? Let's go offensive line. Bobby Lawrence is going to be at left tackle according to the comments I'm seeing. So maybe that group carries over what I thought it did in the second half. It was decent. It wasn't great, but certainly I thought got better as the game went along. We've got about 10, 15 minutes left here, so let's jump around a little bit the rest of the SEC. And if you guys have comments, as questions, whatever, as we go along, feel free, throw them in. We'll definitely get to those. But let's jump in now, the SEC. And the only other early game is South Carolina, Florida. So obviously we're not going to see much of that one because we'll be following Mizzou, Tennessee. I don't know. It doesn't seem like it should really be a game.
No, I mean, I'll be, curious to see if Florida's offense can be as good against a, better defense for sure. I think almost everyone in the league has a better defense than Ole Miss. And also, if Florida's defense gives up, 30 plus points, it'd be a little bit of a red flag because South Carolina's not really known for their offense. That spread on that game, I think we mentioned on Wednesday, is big. It's like 3 touchdowns. I'm not sure it'll be that much of a blowout, but I definitely think Florida should win comfortably if it plays a decent game.
Yeah. Got a question about the SEC. Who's the best quarterback in the SEC? I mean, I think Mac Jones is going to have the best numbers. I'm not sure if he's the best quarterback at this point. You got to go Kyle
actually,
Trask.
I'm going to disagree. I mean, Mac Jones isn't going to have the best numbers. The Mississippi State quarterback's going to have the best numbers. KJ Costello. I mean, Mac Jones might complete a higher percentage of his passes, but 623 yards. There's going to be Sean Robinson might not get there all year.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Sean Robinson.
KJ Costello, but I don't know, best overall quarterback in the SEC right now. I think I'd go Kyle Trask, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's obviously a very small sample size, but yeah, he looked really good last week. He's got weapons to throw to, and I was impressed with him last year. I thought he was the best quarterback Missouri faced last season. So yeah, he'd probably be my pick. Like I said, Costello will put up big numbers. Mac Jones was really solid. And he could, he might be right behind Trask. I just need to see a little bit more of him. But yeah, Trask would be my pick right now.
Yeah, Kellen Mond at A&M is a guy that I want to be in that group, but he hasn't been.
Every time I've never seen him play well. Like, I always hear good things about him, and every time I turn on their game, I'm just unimpressed.
Yeah, he really is not a better quarterback than he was as a freshman. Cam wants to know how many of the COVID players from last week have been cleared to play this week. And first of all, it wasn't 12 last week; it was 7. And I mean, the truth is, we don't know, right? I mean, because the last time we talked to Eli Drinkwitz is on Tuesday, and honestly, what he says on Tuesday, what he knows on Tuesday, doesn't even matter by game day. We know Charlie Harbison's not there.
Right, and I'm not even sure that all 7 were actually out. I think it's possible that some out of the 7 were the ones who ended up opting out. I don't know, because basically the only scholarship player, as far as I could tell, who wasn't on the sidelines last week was Drake Heismeyer, the backup center. And I was pretty diligent in like marking down when I saw people. Maybe I missed someone, but I don't think so. And we don't know if he'll be back. As of Tuesday, there hadn't been any new COVID positives. And Drinkwitz didn't know if some of the guys who missed Alabama could be back. There's like a 10-day quarantine if you were positive, and you can test if you test negative after 10 days, and 14 if you're a high risk exposure. So yeah, I don't know. I don't anticipate, based on what I've seen on pregame on Twitter, I don't anticipate any major absences from a COVID front, but it's one of those things you do have to just kind of wait and see when the game kicks off this season.
Oh, well, and like along those lines, the big news this morning, and I'm mentioning it because Stryker is commenting on it, is Cam Newton has tested positive for COVID. We now don't know if the Chiefs and the Patriots play tomorrow. The Titans and the Steelers already aren't playing. So I had retweeted Missouri's picture of boarding the plane, and I said, they're headed to Knoxville, so it appears game on. And somebody said, hey, was it not going to be? The truth is, you never know, right? I mean, until these teams are actually both in the stadium and on the field, you don't know for sure that any game is going to be played. I mean, Chiefs-Patriots at 3:30 tomorrow, we don't know right now. Missouri-Tennessee, we feel pretty confident they're on the field warming up. We feel pretty confident they're playing here in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But before this, we couldn't say that.
Right, exactly. No, it's a crazy time, and yeah, it seems though I saw at least one tweet that said every starter from like starter/co-starter from the depth chart was in uniform. So seems like there shouldn't be any major absences.
Okay, so let's go ahead and run through spend about a minute on the rest of the SEC, and then we'll wrap up kind of with our final closing thoughts on Mizzou and Tennessee kickoff somewhere around 20 minutes away. So A&M and Alabama, like neither one of us expect this to be a game, right?
Not really. I mean, maybe A&M hangs around for a little bit. They have kind of played Alabama decently competitively the past few years, but I mean, I've got Alabama by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I think they're actually still riding off Johnny Manziel playing him close in 2012. I don't know that they've done it really much since then. Ole Miss and Kentucky, team with a pretty good offense, and now apparently, according to Eric, Lane Kiffin saying that John Reese Plumlee may play this week against a Kentucky team with an excellent defense, and then Kentucky very little offense, and Ole Miss less than very little defense.
Yeah, I got Kentucky on this one. I mean, they should bounce back after last week. I think Auburn's actually a pretty good team. And sometimes you'd say, can this Kentucky team score enough points? I think like a JV team could score points against Ole Miss. It's hard to stop them sometimes, but Ole Miss's defense looked a little shaky last week. So no, I think Kentucky should take care of business there.
Night games: Arkansas and Mississippi State. Barry Odom gets that Mike Leach passing game that threw for 623 yards last week. I don't think he throws for 623, but I don't think he has to against Arkansas.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Mississippi State plays somewhat of a similar game to Georgia last week, where they kind of sleepwalk through the first quarter and a half, first half, and then figure it out and then put up points in a hurry. I don't know. Arkansas they're just going to be at a talent deficit in pretty much every game they play this season.
Yeah, because they don't get Vandy, so
right.
Every other game, every other team's just better than they are right now. Okay, another 6:30 game, LSU at Vandy. Look, I know LSU got beat last week, and Vandy played closed with A&M. But this to me is like a market correction game where this is over mid-second quarter.
Yeah, probably so. Vandy looked, like you said, Vandy looked better than people expected. LSU certainly worse than people expected. I don't know. I always think, if you get a team like LSU who had big expectations and it like all goes south in the opener, so it can really kind of go one of two ways. Like they can really correct or it can get a little bit ugly. Given the opponent, I think it's kind of a golden opportunity to get the thing back on the rails there. So yeah, I would anticipate they take care of business.
I mean, look, if LSU loses this game, Ed Orgeron is going to be on the hot seat faster than any coach who's coming off a national title in the history of football.
Yeah.
Game of the week in the SEC, and one that frankly I'm hoping our post game is done soon enough to watch most of. Number 7, Auburn at number 4, Georgia. Auburn looked really good last week. Georgia looked as good as it has to look, or had to look, I should say. I don't know. What do we think about this one?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess the biggest question clearly is what kind of quarterback play Georgia's going to get. JT Daniels wasn't eligible last week, but is this week, but he hasn't played in a long time. He's been hurt. I don't even know who they're starting. I don't know if they've announced. So I mean, I'm sticking with Georgia. I think just because I think they're the more talented team, and I think I'm kind of picking off the last few years. Like they've just been a little bit better than Auburn. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if this is a close game or Auburn pulls it out. I think it's probably going to be relatively low scoring.
Yeah, I think 24 points probably wins that game. That'll be a good one to watch. But obviously, all eyes here going to be on Mizzou and Tennessee about 17 minutes from at least the start of the broadcast, if not kickoff in Neyland Stadium. Any final look, we've made our predictions, so no point to go through that again, but any final thoughts on, what Missouri has to do to win this game?
I think the biggest thing is get really clean offensive execution because, I still think this offense is it's going to have some growing pains. It's offensive line still has some work to do. We're not totally. I'm still not 100% sold on Sean Robinson, even though he was good last week. I think the biggest thing that they can do is avoid the big negative plays. Try to cut down on the turnovers. Obviously, when you have two teams that are even close in talent level, turnover margin's a big thing. And then on the other side, certainly, if they can get off the field on third down, that would be huge. And this would be should be a good test because Tennessee was very bad at converting third downs last week. So I think, avoiding the mistakes on offense and getting off the field on third down on defense will be the two big keys.
Yeah, I just, rather than one specific thing, I think I need to see a Missouri team that has a chance going into the fourth quarter. Give yourself a chance to win this game. I mean, if you're down, and by that, I mean, at some point, you have the ball with the chance to tie. I don't mean it's 24-10, and if everything goes right, yeah, you can win. I mean, have a chance in the fourth quarter. I think that would certainly be an excellent sign for Eli Drinkwitz week one, and something that everybody would like to see from the Missouri side of things. So, Mitch, going to let you run, get set. I'll call you back in about 15 minutes for the game show. I'm going to finish this up, and we'll talk to you in a few.
Sounds great. Excited.
All right, Mitchell Forty, done with us for now. Again, we will bring him back in 15 minutes for the On the Call with Power Mizzou, brought to you by Call and Gentry Law Group down in Jefferson City. That is our live game watch along. We're going to start that right at 11 o'clock for you guys. And get you set up. We're going to watch the game along with you. If you're here for the pregame, look, you're not going to be at the game. You don't even necessarily have to have the volume up on us. If you want to listen to me and Mitch and get our thoughts through the game, a lot of people liked my thoughts last week better than they did the broadcast crew. Listen to us and comment with us just while having the game on another screen. That's great. If you guys want to have the game audio up on the broadcast and just kind of have us on to add your comments that will pop up on the screen, that's great. We're going to interact with you. We're both going to have the game up on a separate screen. We can't have the broadcast audio up because, that can't bleed through our broadcast. That is illegal. We don't pay millions of dollars in rights to broadcast this. So it'll just be us talking, taking your comments, taking your questions, interacting with you guys for as long as Missouri and Tennessee are playing. Hey, they've played a 4 overtime game there before. Hopefully it doesn't last that long, to be quite honest with you. But again, thanks for joining us this morning here on the Burger Smokehouse at-home tailgate. On the way out the door, do want to remind you, smokehouse.com is Burger's website. You can go there. You can order everything, get it shipped to you. I had a lot shipped to me. It's freeze-dried. They send it in coolers with ice packs, put it all straight in the deep freeze when I got it. You can do that. I've got food for the whole season. And it's good stuff. This morning had some bacon to go along with the rest of my pregame meal. So you can do that at smokehouse.com, or you can go to Deerberg, Schnucks, Price Chopper, Woods, CNR, Hy-Vee, Gerbs, Walmart, Hen House. There's pulled pork, there's brisket, there's ribs, there's ham, there's bacon, there's turkey. Hickory smoked turkeys. Hey, in the next month, Thanksgiving, get one of those. Make prep a little bit easier. But thanks to Burger Smokehouse. Thanks to you guys for watching along, for all your comments, your participation. Before we log off here, we still got about 70 of you guys online watching till the bitter end. Really appreciate that. We've gone a little over an hour and a half. Give us a like before you close out here. Subscribe. You can set notifications for all our shows. Again, we are just 12 minutes from the top of the hour. That's when we're going to start On the Call, presented by Call & Gentry Law Firm. So for now, Gabe DeArmond going to take a quick break. Be right back at 11 o'clock with you guys on a new show, new broadcast, same channel. So if you found this, you can find that. Thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you for Missouri and Tennessee coming up 12 minutes from now.